Hi, everybody, and welcome to our monthly buzz with Cicada Innovations. My name is Sally Ann Williams, and I'm the CEO of Cicada, and I'm excited to have you join me today. Before I introduce Courtney, I wanted to just kind of frame the conversation that we're about to have a little bit, because I think it's a really important one. We're coming into, COP26, and the conversation, I think, around the world is, one that is quite serious. It can be quite solemn, and it can feel quite daunting and dire in a lot of circumstances. I think for many people, I've seen a lot of anxiety and a real feeling of dismay that we're not going to get the collaboration that we need, that we're not going to get the commitments that we need from our world leaders and from people to make change. And fundamentally, for me, the way I view things is that every challenge is this one side of the coin, and the other side of the coin is opportunity. And so when we can reframe things as to the opportunity that we have to lean in here and make a difference, we actually start to have a different conversation about what the opportunity is, not just in climate, but in all of the surrounding effects that climate have on health and well-being and food and energy, and prosperity and equality for people and for planet. And so for us today, that's kind of the reframing of the conversation that we want to have. We want to have with thinking about things from an upstream, not a downstream perspective. So downstream thinking is, for somebody that cuts their finger, it's like we might dress that with a Band-Aid, or we might get stitches if it's really serious. We treat the problem. But upstream thinking actually goes, well, how did you get injured? What happened? Oh, you fell over that, or you used something in an appropriate way. Let me solve that problem to actually prevent the injury in the first place. And so it's with that level of optimism and upstream thinking that we want to frame the conversation that we're having today. And I can think of nobody better to have this conversation with my dear friend, Courtney Hohn. Courtney is the chief storyteller of X, the Moonshot Factory. And moonshots, by their very definition, are ambitious goals and ambitious futures that we just don't even know are possible, but they solve things fundamentally for people and planet in a different way. And the whole perspective that they have at X and that Courtney brings to the table is one of positivity and hope, but also mixed with a really healthy dose of pragmatism of actually sometimes we need to be critical and kill things. And so, Courtney, I am so excited to get into this. I am so excited to welcome you here today. We've talked about having a conversation that we have in private, in public forever, and now we're doing it. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and I wish we could be together. I'm not sure many of you know, but Sally and I worked together when I was based at Google Australia for a couple of years in the 2010-2012 timeframe, when we worked together on getting a lot of Aussie entrepreneurs to embrace the opportunity of the internet and stay home rather than flying to San Francisco or London. So we have a lot of history together.
We do. And I think that's what makes this conversation so much fun is, though, I'm going to give people a little look under the hood before we kick off and start with the big picture. But, Courtney and I have been really good friends for a really long time. And one of the reasons I think we gravitate to each other and we spend time connecting every fortnight is because we do believe in the power of positive thinking and hope, but not in a sort of woo-woo kind of crazy way, but actually that if you take the power of science and engineering and you 10x it and think really big and bold, you actually could, really fail forward and bring something to the world that no one's thought about, that solves some fundamental problems. So maybe let's sort of give a quick snapshot of X and the thinking, and about what, why you made the move over from Google into X and that sort of radical thinking about X. And then we're going to talk about the big picture of what we're here to discuss today.
Sure, sounds good. So why don't I start by saying, well, what the heck is a Moonshot Factory? So X grew out of Google. We were originally born as Google X, and the impetus to form Google X, and this was in about 2010, was to ask the question, what could Google be beyond the Google that we know for its internet products? So back in 2010, Larry and Sergey had already been asking a lot of big questions about how technology could fundamentally make people's lives better. And they started with organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. And by 2010 or so, they were already into Android and YouTube and lots of things. But they were starting to think about the challenge that every large maturing company faces, which is what's next? How do you keep on growing and building. And in business circles, that's known as beating the innovator's dilemma. But Larry and Sergey never got out of bed for the stock price or the dollars. What they got out of bed for really was the opportunity to use technology to make people's lives fundamentally better. And so they set up Google X in a corner of the campus in Mountain View. And the first project was self-driving cars. And at first it was working on problems that were distinct from Google's more software-centric problems. And we were very hardware-based. So self-driving cars, internet balloons, wing delivery drones, things like that. And then we got going on some of these huge problems and kind of sci-fi sounding technologies. And then when Alphabet, as Google continued to get bigger, by 2015, Google had decided to form Alphabet because it was so, the company was getting so unwieldy, and it was quite difficult to manage a company where one corner of it was a very, very mature business, search and ads and Chrome and Android, and then other parts of it needed to have the freedom to run as fast as startups can run. And they also needed the freedom to fail, like startups often do. And so X ended up carving out to be its own Moonshot Factory. But from the beginning, the mission of X has stayed the same, which is to work on problems that affect millions, if not billions of people, and to try to find those really radical sci-fi technologies to solve them.
And I love the way that sort of, the vision is actually to solve, fundamental challenges and not be afraid of failure. And we're going to dig into that in a minute. But I think what's really interesting kind of to frame the conversation today around, COP26, around the environment, around some of the challenges that we're facing in the world. Right now, if we look at the conversation and the narrative, at least what I see here in Australia, but also what I see globally, it feels, I don't know if it feels this way to you, but it feels very incrementalism to me. It's like, well, we're here and we need to transition to this. And so we're looking from the status quo and how we can make it incrementally better. But there's a really interesting way, I think, that X thinks about it, which is to start with this big picture. And so that's what I kind of want to do. So let's press fast forward on life. We are still looking fabulous in 2050. Some breakthrough technology there.
That's right. Anti-aging moonshots.
Absolutely. Anti-aging moonshot. I'm there for it. I want to feel this good when I don't even know how old I'll be then. I don't want to do the math on that today. But, we're 2050 and, we are optimistic and we've solved some of the fundamental challenges of global warming and climate and things that we're facing today that everyone's gathering at COP26 to talk about. We've solved them. What have we done? What's some of the science element? Not thinking about incrementally of like we've got renewables or what have you. What are some of the science elements that we've had to solve for? What are some of the things that you're seeing and talking about in the discussions that you're having? And how did we get there? Because I think it's probably going to be fundamentally different to what we're doing right now.
Yeah, well, and I'll offer a disclaimer to start because I am not a technologist, and also those of us who spend a lot of time with people who invent the future know how impossible it is to predict the future. And I'll also take this from the kind of what have we done, but also the how have we learned to live and work differently perspective. I mean, I think no question we've found ways to decarbonize the energy supply, decarbonize the grid, decarbonize our economies. And we've obviously found a variety of methods for carbon sequestration, no question there. But I think underlying that, we've gone back and reimagined some of the building blocks of the modern world. The world that we're living in is the world that grew up in the 19th and 20th centuries of innovations around materials and machinery, and even the notion of a corporation and an assembly line. Those were inventions. And what are the new approaches and new inventions? I think one of the areas that's really ripe for breakthrough innovation is in materials science. And I think concrete is one of the most carbon intensive kind of creations and processes, or how you make steel, or how you all these ingredients that add up to the world that we move through. I think especially with the advent of machine learning and it to be used as a design tool in imagining new types of substances and combinations and working really quickly through different types of material possibilities, all the way down to molecular structures. I think that's one area that I think could get really interesting.
I have to interrupt you because I love that area. It's one of my favorite things to kind of reimagine and going, concrete is no longer concrete as we know it. It's not made from sand, which is also not a renewable resource right now, people. So if you can solve that problem, and concrete sand can't come from deserts, it's like, anyway, there's a whole thing about sand and concrete, which is problematic. But actually, maybe concrete bricks are actually made from mushrooms and they're grown and they're not just carbon negative, but they're carbon neutral, but they're carbon negative. And, what can we build from seaweed, and what can we build from, other living structures that are not just something that absorbs carbon, but actually, in the way that we can transform it and bring it to market as a fundamental building block could actually be negative, not neutral, which is amazing.
Yeah, and that also tracks down from the real macro building blocks of our society down to, what are we putting on our bodies and kind of, so that, yeah, there's a lot of really fascinating startups. I've seen them here in the Bay Area, and I think we're starting to see them around the world getting the confidence to.
It's super interesting that you mentioned that what you're wearing, and like what we're wearing is, one of the things is that actually becomes a huge waste problem, and we're all trying to deal with waste by making it more recyclable or compostable. But what if we could actually completely transform it to something else, and it could be actually restructured and redesigned and redeveloped into a new material? Like there's so many ways of thinking really outside of the box, instead of starting, from where we are, but start from the end state of where we want to be and what that world looks like, and reimagining it and working backwards. So I want to kind of like that fundamental thinking about working backwards and kind of imagining that future state and then going, what would we need to solve for it? Like, to me, that is like the fundamentals of X's approach, right? It's like what you do, it's in your DNA about how you kind of think about the culture and of radical breakthroughs. So I'd love to kind of, could you describe to me, literally what that moonshot is? I mean, I know the 3 circles. I don't want to give that away and do your storytelling job for you, but like describe that in that process of how you kind of decide when something is a moonshot. And for those of you who aren't familiar with moonshots, my favorite part of this is just go look it up on your favorite search engine. Not assuming what that is, of course, but it's when Kennedy said, in this decade, we're going to put a man on the moon. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it anyway. It's that we don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it anyway. So how do you kind of, what's that approach and that radical thinking that you use?
Sure. So we have this blueprint that all of the moonshots at X ideally fit into. So it's a 3-circle Venn diagram. And the first ingredient that an X moonshot has to have is a huge problem in the world. So, at our scale, it's many, many millions, if not billions of people. A great example of this is the self-driving car project, where 1.2, 1.3 million people die on the world's roads every year. And certainly with the advent of mobile phones, that number is going up, not down. So that's a huge problem. The second ingredient is a radical solution, a proposed answer to the huge problem that might sound like science fiction today, but if you could actually find a way to make it work, it could solve that problem. So back in 2009, self-driving cars was that mind-blowing sci-fi. Then the third ingredient is a breakthrough technology. And the way we work, the technology, it doesn't need to be fully done and ready to scale, but there needs to be enough of a technical or scientific breakthrough that we're ready to step out onto that bridge from researchy, we think this could work, to we think it's pretty likely to work, so let's build some prototypes and try. So for self-driving cars in 2009, those breakthrough technologies that were starting to arrive were smarter sensors and smarter software, such that you could stick them on or in a car and use that to help the car navigate its place in the world and navigate different roads and obstacles. So that's what we shoot for. And a big part of my job is helping our entrepreneurial technologists kind of get the brilliant insights and instincts out of their head and into a vision for where the moonshot could be over the long term, even if just what they have today is some, duct tape and cardboard and a few models.
So there's a couple of things I want to unpack there for people that maybe that was like a lot and they've just gone, oh, wow, that sounds amazing. The fundamental thing here is you're starting with the end state in mind. You're starting with that, what are we actually trying to solve for? Is this a real problem? Or is it a perceived problem? Is it a problem that a lot of people face? Or is it a problem that only some people face? And really kind of actually understanding that before you're starting with the breakthrough technology or before you're starting to sort of, build anything. And that's a massive mind shift for a lot of people, to really spend the time thinking about the problem and going, is it big enough to now kind of look for breakthrough technology or work on that and think about it? So I want to, I know we've got some great examples that we want to kind of talk through, because I think it illustrates the process that you go through with X, of the thinking about it and how you're creating the environment for this. Let's dive into some of the climate focused moonshots that you've done over the years, because there's been lots, and feel free to weave in any moonshots. We love every story that we can get. It's such a learning moment to hear from how somebody else came up with an idea and what their pathway was. But it'd be really good to kind of like unpack a couple of these journeys and go, what was the thinking? What was the thinking about going after it and deciding it was a moonshot in the first place? What was the breakthrough technology? What worked? What didn't work? What are the outcomes? So, can we start with Makani maybe? Because there's some really interesting, I'm a little bit closer to that. That was in my time when I was still at Google. So I have a bit more insight, but tell us about that and why that became a moonshot, and walk us through the story there for those who don't know it.
Sure. So Makani was asking the question, so it was an energy focus, a wind energy moonshot. And the question was, could you gather energy from the wind without the tons of steel and concrete necessary to build wind turbines? So this was actually a startup in the Bay Area in California, and then X ended up acquiring it because in its very nascent stages, I'm talking like 2012-ish, 2011-ish maybe. And they were looking at the evolution of modern lightweight materials such that they could maybe make an aircraft that could go up where the wind is high and fly in circles with there were little propellers all the way down this airplane shaped craft. And when the Makani kite would fly in circles, the propellers would turn and then send the electricity down a tether back to the ground. And all of this was governed with really smart software. And so it was that combination, the what ifs that the team was asking, well, huge problem, renewable energy, and then breakthrough tech and radical solution. Could you fly a kite to gather electricity? And it was these smart materials and smart control software that were starting to make this possible. And I'm going to fast forward you to the end because
it sounds amazing. Where's my Makani in my backyard, right? Giving me my own energy. I'm ready. Bring it to me.
Or flying out off the coast of Sydney. Farms of really cool flights. So sadly, we chose to shut Makani down. We had actually turned it into an Other Bet, a company within Alphabet, because we were excited that it was starting to produce enough electricity that it was showing signs of commercial viability. But we actually shut it down in, I think it was early 2020. COVID
so like
time.
10 years later, roughly, yeah. I think, yeah.
Yeah, and after it had actually not only flown on land, but it had actually flown successfully off the coast of Norway, because we didn't need to compete with wind turbines there's already a lot of places on Earth where a wind turbine is a perfectly good solution. But we wanted to see if Makani could go to places where the wind was much stronger and more consistent, and where a wind turbine wasn't a good answer. And so we started exploring offshore wind. But sadly, we had to shut it down because the path to commercializing it was proving much more difficult and much riskier than we had anticipated. And I'm guessing your audience might be wondering why you've asked me to talk about a cool technology that then, didn't take off.
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's really important, I think, to get into this, right? Because one is you need to be bold enough to have this idea and then go for it and try and prove it. And there's some science that you've just talked about that was proven in Makani. So why didn't it happen? Like, what happened that the commercial reality, I mean, what was going on in the market that kind of made this not commercially viable at that time?
Yeah, so the price of wind, the cost to produce, was just plummeting during the years that we were trying to make Makani work, because Makani existed as a set of prototypes, and yes, it was working in onesies and twosies, but actually building a scalable business, building those wings in a way that they could repeatedly be manufactured for the reliability of energy generation and safety and operations that a scalable business needs, to be able to do that in a way that actually makes money, especially when the costs are dropping so quickly. Those were dynamics that we weren't able to overcome. And we did have investment from Shell, the big energy company. So we were seeing indications that there was some market pull there and that there were other companies willing to take the risk with us. But ultimately, what all of us as technologists have to be really honest about is there market pull there? Yeah. And this is especially pernicious when you are backed by the coffers of Alphabet. There's this sense, this pressure of, well, you guys have lots of money. This is good for the world. Shouldn't you just do it because it's good for the world? And that's not sustainable. You're just, pumping more money into the money chute. What we believe in doing is creating technology that is good for the world and self-sustaining, and business is the mechanism by which it becomes self-sustaining. And so that's something that I think is really important for all entrepreneurial technologists to understand. You have to be 100% ready and professional on both sides.
100%. And I think that's one of the critical things that we need to know. This isn't philanthropy. This is actually about building a viable business that is going to do good for people, planet, and prosperity. And prosperity allows you to do more good for people and planet if that's your what your focus is. So I think when you shut down Makani, there was quite a lot of people working still in the Moonshot on it and kind of going for it. Like, what happened? Like, failure. I mean, that's a pretty public failure for those of us in the know. It's pretty, it's never, I've had to shut down projects when in my lifetime. It's not an easy one to stand in front of the room and be like, hey, this isn't going to go forward any further. What happens from that? And how do you make the case to people that we need to believe in moonshots and do it? Like, what do you do to kind of flow on from there? And what happened?
Yeah, so one thing, I want to give massive tribute to Fort Felker, who is the general manager of that project and the CEO of Makani. He believed the whole way along in complete transparency with his team about all the risks that they were facing all the way along. And they were all there for the ride until the end. They knew the risks. And then they had to take the steps to shut it down. But one of the things, the values that they stuck to as the end of their journey neared, was they wanted to be able to give away what they had learned to others so that we could save years of hard-earned experience, so other people didn't have to learn the same lessons. We wanted to give away all sorts of assets so that other people, whether they're aerospace engineers or also working in the wind industry, or maybe just interested in novel types of flight vehicles, we wanted to give away what we had learned so others could learn and build from there. In fact, we have more than 400 patents that we have issued a non-assertion pledge around. So those libraries are available for anyone to go and pour through. And if you see something that you want to build on, it's there. And we mostly want to, we're proud to tell the story. There's actually a documentary available on YouTube. The team put together their film archives because we wanted to show that this is just what innovation takes. Sometimes it is deeply painful, it is difficult, and we want others to feel the bravery to try, the feel the support when you all on this call have your tough days and need to get up and dust yourself off and try again. Like, know that there are others who've been there before, and we can all support each other through that emotional journey and through the sharing of expertise.
So, I mean, there's a couple of things there that are really interesting. One is the radical generosity of like actually sharing your learnings with others and going, this is a pay it forward moment. And, we have that ethos that we try and live in Cicada, which is this pay it forward. You've got to help the people that are going to be the next generation. You might be really successful, you might not, but how do you continually actually pay that forward into the ecosystem? And so I think that's brilliant. And no one's success is built in isolation. It is built off other people's understandings, other people's breakthroughs, other people's, things that they've discovered. What happened with the leadership team? Like, what happened with the team from this? Because failure is something that can be felt really deeply personal. And I think if we're talking about, if we're going to land this and talk about climate change and COP26 and, why this thinking matters so much, if we're going to be radical in our experimentation and our thinking, and we're going to, take some moonshots, we actually have to have a level of resilience that can deal with failure in different ways. And, that's not just a personal thing. I think that is both a personal and a corporate thing. So how did that happen, and how did that play out?
Yeah, so whenever, and I can speak to X at large, not just Makani, because this is true of every project that we shut down. So when we do have to say goodbye to a lot of these ideas, because most ideas at X do not work out, we take great care of the teams. We celebrate their learning. We hold space for them to be sad and angry and reflective, and maybe sad and angry some more. We work really hard to help them find their next roles, be that within X, within Alphabet. We have a very active X alumni network. If we have any Aussies, I'll send them home.
Yes, please send them home.
Yeah. So there's this huge kind of social effort that kicks in to try to help people through that transition. In fact, last summer, some of my team members put together a video, kind of like an It Gets Better video, but for failed projects, where a number of Xers who had their projects killed over the years, current Xers and alums, came back and made a video that people who are just going through that grief fresh could see. And we give them we give them bonuses. We send them on vacation. They get promoted. Like, just because your project fails doesn't mean you shouldn't get promoted. Like, you could have done that learning in such a spectacular way that you deserve to move on to newer levels of responsibility and reward.
So, I mean, we're talking about a real cultural transformation in our organizations. And I think, when it comes to thinking about globally at some of the challenges, that needs to happen in the public sphere about how we think about politics as well, and how we think about news. And, I am extrapolating out a little bit here, but, if we are continually playing the blame game, we never give people the permission to be brave and truly try something audacious, because we don't create the space for failure and learning. And so there's this kind of, risk reward thing. And I think the risk reward thing is really interesting, because it's often said, Australia, one of the things limiting Australia is we don't have, high tolerance for risk, which I actually quite disagree with. I think we don't have a space for failure. And so I do think we have this high tolerance for risk and to go after it, but it's if we don't give people the grace for failure, and we have to, there's some caveats around that. There's been some, if you're doing bad and you're doing bad for humanity and people, and you're taking their money illegally and sort of those things, that's the kind of failure that we have a certain pathway for you. And hopefully that ends up in, legal issues and things like that kind of give you your due justice. But when you're actually trying to, make a difference, how do we create space for that, I think is a really important one. So let's, I really want to dig into another moonshot because in this space, because I think there's so much learning from the examples. And I know that you've had another really big, ambitious one around turning seawater into a carbon neutral fuel. So where's that? And can I fill up my car today? Thanks.
Maybe, how about this? Maybe that's part of the vision in 2050 that we should have started with.
So we're going to start this moonshot again.
That's right. Well, and actually that's what's so interesting here. So we had a project called Foghorn where we actually did turn seawater into a carbon neutral fuel. This was X in collaboration with folks at Park Research. So we don't just work alone in our little test tubes, and we are often out collaborating with other great researchers. And they had enough of a technology prototype that we thought, we should really pour some fuel on this, all right. But what was really interesting about how the team approached this moonshot was they had parallel tracks of work. They had a technology team that was working to figure out how to de-risk the technology and figure out any roadblocks to scaling it. And then they had a team that was focused on the path to market would be, I think, too early a characterization, but what they were investigating was the economic viability of the moonshot, because to get a gallon of fuel to our gas tanks as consumers or to an airport, there's a long path. And so they needed to understand the cost, and they needed to set as a target a likely price at which the moonshot would be viable. And so actually very early on in the project lead, Courtney Hohn, set what we call at X a kill signal. So she knew that this moonshot was high risk, like everything that we do. And she knew that we were going to be tempted to get emotionally wrapped up in this beautiful idea to solve climate change with this carbon neutral fuel. And so they, at the beginning, set a target that they would kill their project if at the moment they couldn't see a path to getting $5 per gallon of this fuel. And they had backed that out because the price of a gallon of gas in really expensive places like Scandinavia at that time was about $8 a gallon. So they figured if they could get their fuel for $5 and then leave $3 for profit margin, marketing, distribution, all that, do that. So fast forward a couple of years. By this point, they had investigated all the components that they would need to have it scale. They needed to have scalable amounts of seawater, desalinated. They needed to be able to have sources of hydrogen. So they had mapped out all the different ingredients and what it would take to really do this at scale. And they couldn't get within sight of $5 a gallon. And again, keep in mind, a lot of this is research and modeling. And yes, there's tech prototyping happening, but there's this parallel path where you're just checking on this commercial viability. And ultimately, the big, and this was in 2015, 2016, the big, kind of dagger in the heart of their dreams was the cost of green hydrogen.
Yeah.
You could get hydrogen, but you couldn't get green hydrogen, and that would have defeated the purpose of their moonshot. You couldn't get it at a cost that made sense. And so Courtney made the decision, along with the team, to kill their own project. But they walked away. Courtney got a bonus. Well, they all got bonuses. They got vacation. Courtney got promoted. She actually went on to start another project at X in home geothermal that she then spun out of X, and that's a successful company now. But what was beautiful was they also published the results of their work because they wanted to share again with others. And they knew that out there would be people who were chemical engineering experts or green hydrogen experts. And actually, I think the last issue of The Economist had a big feature on the prospects for green hydrogen. So at some point, all these technologies do have their day when enough progress happens that you can then get the aggressive motion that you need, not just on the tech side, but on the business side. And so who knows, maybe foghorn fuel is a part of our collective future, even if X only did the first little bit of the relay race to see what was possible.
So I just want to pull out a couple of things because it's such a rich story, and thank you for sharing it because I think it's one that a lot of people wouldn't know about. And for those of us that are in Australia, hydrogen and green hydrogen is being, there's a huge amount of investment and energy being done by, many people in the private sector, but also government to sort of look at that as a viable sort of pathway forward. And I think it's really interesting to kind of make the connections. And, I think there's probably quite a few people on this call going, Courtney, that's all and well, you work for a, multi-billion-dollar organization that can afford to invest in these things and fail. But, and that's true, startup in failure terms means having to go find another job, or the economic prospects are not the same. People are not necessarily going to get promoted or bonuses. They're going to have to wind down businesses. But actually, I do think the culture of how you start Moonshots and actually what you do at the end of one, if it's not working, can be the same. I think there's some really interesting lessons learned that I just want to pull out a bit and then maybe chat about along with any other examples. Is I think one that you talked about there, which we haven't dug into, is around partnerships. And you mentioned it loosely with Makani as well, with Shell, but with Foghorn that you were working with a lab as well, that actually, if we're going to take these radical, ambitious goals, we can't do it in isolation, that we actually need to think about partners on the way. Could you unpack that a little bit more for us about, how you think about partnerships and who are they? Because I don't think it's just commercial partners, right? It's scientific, it's commercial, it's investment. Like, what does that look like? And why is that so critical that you're thinking about that as you're thinking about investigating the moonshot and not trying to do it in a black box?
That's it. I think there's a real temptation in any human, but especially humans who like to make things, like engineers, like to think the answer. It's also very tempting when you're in a big bubble of a company like Alphabet to think, oh, we have lots of smart people, we must know the answer. And so we work really hard to be porous and to really reach out and make contact with the outside world, with people who can poke holes in our assumptions, who know parts of the problem space that we don't have visibility into, who know parts of the emerging technology space, and to get the best of kind of all those combined minds with lots of different perspectives all mashing together. But it's actually quite challenging because it takes finding folks who have the right spirit. I do think a lot of our commercial partnerships, we try to emphasize, look, you're not coming to us as if we're a regular tech vendor. You're coming to us as a learning partner, as an R&D partner. And what do we want to learn together? Not what's the percent uptime on the technology that we want to write into the contract. But that's often difficult, because large businesses often have very demanding shareholders and very strict timelines, and they have to hit their product roadmaps. So finding the right engagement models it's an art.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, right? If we're thinking about COP26, if we're thinking about climate, if we're thinking about solving these problems, we're not going to do it in isolations, right? To your point earlier about Foghorn, that supply chain and understanding the distribution process and what does it look like to get fuel from one point to another, and all of those costs. If you're not a distribution or a logistics person, you don't know that. You have to partner with people, and you're going to have to actually create those partnerships down the line. And so talking to people and having those conversations and actually going, what is the ultimate vision here? Are we aligned on it? Do we have a vision and a values alignment that we're going to go on this learning journey together? I think is really critical and something that is a powerful transformation factor in that journey. There's something else I want to pull out from both Foghorn and Makani. You did talk about the radical generosity of, again, there's been a whole bunch of learning shared, and you've seen people actually developing things off the back of those patterns and things like that. And you've actually had somebody, go out and spin out and start another company. Let's talk about that failure, about being a speed bump. We talked about this the other day when we were catching up, about being a temporary speed bump into success. And you talked about, I think it was a company that you talked about, was it called Dandelion?
Oh, that's the company that Kathy spun out from X. So yeah, so Kathy had founded Foghorn and then picked up a project called Dandelion, which was home geothermal heating and cooling. And it turns out that Alphabet wasn't the best place to build that kind of a business. engineering puzzles they cracked while they were at X, but it largely was a finance and operations play, like how do you get consumers to change out the heating and cooling systems that are working just fine in their homes right now in favor of this newfangled technology. And that was something that we felt she could accelerate better with more conventional venture capital behind her. And so she went out and raised money that way.
So there's something that you said there that's super interesting, and I think it's going to transition into the next sort of example that we want to talk about, is that actually sometimes things are better done elsewhere and not inside of the organization that they start in, because the system that they need to support that is better done elsewhere. But you also mentioned about talking about changing consumer behavior, and it's not just consumer behavior we sometimes need to change, it's policy behavior, it's government behavior, it's market behavior, it's other business behavior. So I know there's a couple of other moonshots that you're working around electric grids and stuff like that. You know, tell us about that and a little bit about how that, because to me that example, like I think this is an example of collaboration and actually thinking about how do you think about doing things differently as a group or as a system, because you've always done something one way. So how do we, if we want to make something better, what does that look like? And I think this is a really fascinating one.
Yeah, so this is a project that is live within X and is run by this extraordinary leader named Audrey Zibelman, who actually moved from Australia, running emo in Australia, to try a moonshot at X. And the moonshot is, the mega moonshot is, how do we decarbonize the entire electric grid? But a moonshot nestled in that bigger moonshot is, how can we actually create a virtualized version of the electric grid? The electric grid is the biggest machine in the world, but it currently exists through so many different organizations, operations, whether it's utilities and down to the street outside your house. And it's this amorphous kind of thing, but it has to run and it has to be there. But it was never built for what we're asking of it today. And it was certainly not built to sustain the challenges that climate change is going to throw at it in the coming decades. It was built to move, the electric grid was built to move energy from fossil fueled powered, like central power plants, down out into communities. Now it's being asked to onboard many different types of energy, many of which have not been invented yet. There's millions, if not billions, of devices, think solar panels and cars and thermostats, all kind of plugging in, and some are pulling from the grid, some are generating into the grid, sometimes both. You've got climate change, weather disruptions. So how the heck can you, how are we going to manage this? So this is the question that Audrey and her team are asking. And the first step is, can we build this virtualized version of the grid that makes it easier to see, to simulate, to share, to plan, down nanoseconds, all the way out to decades, all different models and, guesswork. And what if we put this there and pull that in here? So anyway, software, magical thing. We hope it can help. But Audrey's figuring that out. But here to get back to your point, we can't take this moonshot alone.
Yeah.
And so what this team and Audrey have gone out and done is they have found willing collaborators, willing dreamers and optimists, if you will, in Chile and New Zealand and South Africa and part of the US. And all of those utilities and grid operators are coming to the table as co-dreamers and co-creation partners and sharing experiences and data and perspective and hacking on prototypes and giving us harsh feedback. And we're going to figure this out in collaboration with the people who are keeping our lights on today. And I think that's really important for any of us who are dreaming of this better future. It has to grow within and around the today. And there's so many people out there who are deeply expert in these problems. Why wouldn't we all want to be at the table together? But it can be intimidating to think, well, where do I start? Or how do I talk to them? Or I'm a technologist. How do I know how to talk to someone in the government or someone, an investor, right? Like we all have to learn how to speak each other's languages and find that vision that aligns us, that we're willing to do the hard yards to kind of get through together.
Yeah, I think that's so important what you just said there at the end of that. It's like, you know, this is an ambitious goal that you actually can't drive all on one organization, because you actually don't control most of the components of it, and you never will. Well, presumably never will, you know, but so how do you actually, you know, build a solution when you're not in direct control? And that is influencing, it is relationship building, it is building a consortium of people that have a higher, vision about what they're trying to achieve collectively, and their own organizations can feed up into that and is a benefit from that vision being fulfilled. So, I mean, I feel like that's what everybody wants from COP26. I mean, I gotta say, I sit on the other side of the coin on this one and go, you're gonna have some really great conversations around the table. I'm really hopeful that, but you know, I don't have a lot of hope for some of those conversations, but I do have hope on the other hand that there is enough goodwill and smart people who are willing to dive into this and kind of change this. I want to unpack for people, because there's a, you know, I think there's a luxury that I certainly experienced in my years at Google. It just kind of pulled out probably my base DNA to kind of go after the hard things and like, let's solve the bits, especially the bits we don't have control over. Like, let's really solve the fundamental structural problems, the system problems, and bring science and technology into it and make change. Let's talk about some of the culture and the DNA at X, because for me, that's the fundamental driver here. So often when we're talking about climate change, when we're talking about COP26, when we're talking about optimism and hope, we're focused on a piece of science or a piece of technology, but actually humans make that, right? Humans make it, humans use it, humans consume it, humans abuse it. We are fundamentally critical in this pathway. So what are some of the cultural sort of mindsets and the things that you do to kind of, I guess, take people from where they come into you? Because most people don't walk into an organization like, you know, like X going, I have this culture. What do you do to create culture, reinforce culture, and drive it so that this kind of thinking is there? Because it is not the norm. You know, it's not what we walk out of our schools or our universities with. Let's be real.
Yeah, that is sadly true. And I actually think every 8-year-old out there is just a moonshot taker ready to go. And then we spend so many of society's structures accidentally smush that imagination and the curiosity. So actually, I think we see our roles at X culturally as kind of degunking that curiosity and imagination, and making it safe to ask the crazy what if questions and just try stuff. So we talk a lot about fear and how to let go of that, and where is it coming from. And we also, this year, we actually had our company-wide audacious goal, which I proposed in a, I don't know, fit of holiday eggnog enthusiasm last year. We declared it the year of unlearning. And this connects to kind of fear and narrowness of thinking, as in many of us have come from places where the prevailing culture was set a clear target, make sure you hit it, don't surprise your boss or your boss's bosses, repeat. And so guess what? The target that you're setting gets smaller and smaller depending on the conservatism of your boss, their boss, their boss, their board, whatever. And so much of what we were trying to do with this year of unlearning was to first teach people to recognize the forces in society or in your past jobs that have narrowed and constrained your thinking, where there's blinders on you and fears baked into you that you don't even realize are there. So first start to recognize them. And then secondly, start to ask, well, once I clear, like, how might I clear those aside? And then from there, what do I really want to do? And then from there, then we give people the extra accelerant of, we're here to do the 10x work, not the 10% work. So it's kind of a chain of self-reflection that then meets this invitation and this place where the goal is not the quarterly OKR. Like the goal is, let's make sure the planet's not on fire, and 50 years.
I love this. And this kind of comes to one of the questions that I'm going to ask, because we've got a couple of questions in here. But this one that Brenton has asked about, saying, love the sound of your and others' career roles at X, the merging of grand ideas and clever science. Can you ever have another job that is as interesting? So I don't know. Do you want to answer that one? I've got my own answer for that.
So as someone who is endlessly curious and has this kind of bottomless, so far, optimism for human ingenuity's ability to like make progress against the world's biggest problems, like I am in my happiest place. And my personal moonshot, part of the reason I enjoy spending time like this is anything that X figures out about how to set people up to be more brave, more audacious, more creative, more imaginative, anything we figure out, I'm going to bottle up and give away. Because all of you out there have that beating heart inside you of the problem that you care a lot about, the ideas that excite you. I want you all to feel what I feel when I dial into my job at X every day. I was actually there physically today, which was amazing. So we've got to unleash all this human ingenuity. And if X can be a bit of a catalyst, whether it's accelerating more amazing startups or inspiring more organizations to set up Moonshot Factories, we'll give you the blueprints, because the world needs more.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say, yes, there are other jobs out there, because I left Google on the engineering team to come and head up Cicada Innovations, because I've got, 46 resident companies behind me trying to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. And to get up every day and support them on their journey is like the biggest privilege I could ever have, really, to support them. So there are the dreamers and the doers. And I don't think we're just dreamers, we're doers, right? We have a bias to action. That's the similarity that Courtney and I have. Every time we have a conversation, we're like, yeah, let's just do this thing. Let's make the decision and go. But you've got to dream and do. And there are groups of us that are around the world doing it. And my biggest plea to all of you, and we'll make sure that we do follow up with this in a wrap-up email and things afterwards, you connect with both of our organizations, because we are collaborative. We are a community, and we're community first, and we're community driven. And so how do we actually help people, dip into this culture, dip into this thinking, dip into this space and take it away? And actually, you might actually be in a great corporate and want to stay there. Great. But how do we help you change the DNA of that organization and that place and actually make it differently? And I'm seeing lots of things coming up in the chart, and I'm seeing Eleanor, I see you there with your little heart, ex-Googler as well, who's making a massive difference down in Gippsland and doing Startup Gippsland and getting people in a more regional environment in Australia to actually take their ideas and transform them. Because I think sometimes you just need to give people permission to have a go, and remove the roadblocks, right? So it's really cool. So look, we're coming close to time. I got a couple of things I want to ask you. COP26, are we hopeful? Are we on the fence? Are we a mixed bag? Like, what are you hoping for? What kind of collaboration and cooperation do you want to see? What's the moonshot that could come out of it? And we'll celebrate any movement that we get, really. Let's be real.
So we were in touch with Christiane Figueres, who is the lead negotiator for the UN in Paris and in Copenhagen before that. And Christiane told us that the biggest threat she sees to success at COP is the pessimism and despair that happens every time we pop open our news these days. And so her hope, which is then becomes my hope, is that enough of those delegates, enough of those leaders from all kind of parts of the world show up with a sense of belief and willingness, because if they don't have optimism and belief as their bedrock, the creativity that's required for the negotiations and the problem solving can't even begin to flow. So let's hope. Should they have sent people to a place with better weather than Glasgow? Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that about optimism. And I think there's something to unpack a little bit there that I think, this is like literally what Sally and Courtney would talk about having a coffee. But, optimism is you don't have optimism because you know how to get there. You have optimism because you have hope you can get there, and you just haven't figured out how to get there yet. And I think that's something that we often confuse with these things. We want people to come out with a fully fledged plan and we want to know how we're going to get there and what's that look like tomorrow and what's that look like in a month and what's the 90-day plan and the 100-day plan. And I think we actually have to reframe it and go, if we're going to come out of this with just optimism, what we really actually need people to do is take the bravery of what Kennedy said when he said, in this decade, we're going to do X. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it anyway. And when we do that, when we say we're going to do this bold, ambitious thing, and we're going to do it anyway, even though we don't know how, we've already admitted our humility and our humbleness and the fact that we don't know everything yet. So we have to go on a discovery journey. We've put it in the case of we, not I or me. It's automatically community going together, and it's kind of done the boldness because it's put a statement of we're going to do it anyway. So we're not like, if it's not done in 90 days, we're all going to quit and throw our toys down in a tantrum. It's like, we're going to do it anyway because humanity is counting on us, like people are counting on us. And I think that's kind of the hope of what, you're talking about here. That's optimism.
And I want to underscore something you just said, the we part of it. These visions are invitations to all of us to show up. And there's this beautiful / depressing quote from an American academic named Clay Shirky, who his expertise is the impact of the internet on the media and the news industry. And he has this quote about what will fix the news industry, which has been just undermined by the economics of the internet. And he said, nothing will work, but everything might.
Yeah.
And that is I think a sentiment that applies quite well to the climate crisis. And in that, all of us who are the entrepreneurial dreamers and doers should feel that invitation and not get hung up on, what if this idea fails? What if my current startup fails? We've got to keep trying. And if we're all trying and sharing and paying it forward and sharing, learning with each other, like we've talked about, then we start to see the flywheel that we've got to develop.
I love that. And I know it's true that every time we catch up together so often, and again, letting people a little under the hood into our relationship, so often it's early in the morning for me, at the end of a busy, sort of towards the end of a day for a busy day for you. We're both really tired and what have you, but I always walk, every single time I walk out of those conversations, and they're personal and they're private, but they're literally this actually, with maybe a few more sort of not so polite phrasings about things thrown in for social context and friendly context. But I always walk away from that hopeful, energized, and excited, because I think there's something about being part of a community of people who go, I don't give a rat's that I don't know how to do it. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to figure it out along the way. There's going to be a lot of blameless postmortems, but I'm going to get going on the way. We are so close to time. What is one thing, if you could say one thing for everybody, like the call to action, the one takeaway, the one activation you want everybody watching this, live today, but also in the video recording, what's the one thing you want people to take away or do? Because I'm a bias to action. So they can't just go, yep, that's nice. I feel good. My cup is full. What do they need to do?
Yeah. So I would start with a challenge, which is, why not you? Any of you out on this call. It's going to take all of us. And then really dial into what is that intersection between your passions and your talents and abilities. That's where you're going to find the most energy, the most creativity, the most persistence through the days that are just terrible and difficult. Go find that and then put that to work in the world. And on any day that you're thinking, I can't do this, just why not? Why not you? You can.
I love it. That is a perfect point to wrap up on, except for the fact I'm going to add a few things because I can't help myself, because I want to riff off that, because this is what happens when we get together. I riff off that. I was like, yeah, why not you? So I want you to do 3 things. Once you've done what Courtney says, I want you to find your phone a friend. So who's that person that when you are down and you're just like, I am having a crap day, I can't do it. What was I thinking? It's all crap. Who's your phone a friend that picks you up and challenges you and dissects it and actually pulls out the gold? And, no surprises here. We're on the line with one of my phone a friends. So, that's, I think, really good. And then the second thing I want you to take away is to really understand what can you do now and today? So what is in your direct control? There's this really powerful thing about sphere of influence and sphere of control. And we all have things that are in our direct control. So what can I do today to make a difference? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do next week? Take action. Don't just have a good intention. Like, actually, what can I do, and do it? And then what can I influence? Because I think there's something that people often stop at that. They think, well, I'm not the prime minister or the president, or I'm not in the UN, or I'm not in $1 billion company. I'm just little old me in, Gippsland, for example. And, actually you can influence an incredible amount of people. Every conversation that you have is an opportunity to influence somebody who has a different realm of control. And if you can influence them to make decisions that lead to a hopeful future, I think that's an incredible opportunity. And I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do here today, is to influence you all to kind of take part and take action and be a part of it. So Courtney, I love you. You're incredible. There is so much mutual love, but it's just, every time I have a conversation with you, I am hopeful, I am energized. I know that I'm encouraged by the fact that there are groups of people around the world in X, but, in Cicada, in other places as well, that are really going hard after the problems that we're facing. And it's a privilege to connect. It's a privilege to have this time with you today to share some of that. And I just want to thank you. Thank you for the conversation. I want to thank you in advance that we're going to do this again next year, and hopefully in person, right down there.
Yes.
Putting it out there, you gotta influence, and you gotta ask. I got control of this, and I'm trying to influence your budget next year.
We need an exchange program.
Correct. I think so. I think it's a really powerful thing. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and everything that you've shared today. I think it's been incredibly valuable. I see so many people in the chat being like, fantastic, optimistic, hopeful, happy, and that's what we need, right? I think it's that fuels people to momentum and to doing things. So thank you so much for joining us today, and to the whole team at X. And we wish you well as you go to COP20. As the team, I know some of them are going to COP26, and we send them with all of the optimism that we possibly can, and the hope that we can, and say, don't take no for an answer on wild, ambitious dreaming and thinking, because there's a whole bunch of people that will support you on that journey. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's delightful to see the energy and the optimism. This is going to fuel me as I go back to our moonshot takers. So yes, let's talk about that exchange program.
Absolutely, it's done. Consider it a done deal. Decision makers in the room. If anything I remember from my Google meeting instruction days, make sure the decision makers in the room. Job done. Excellent. But look, I want to thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us today and watching. This is such an awesome conversation to have, and hopefully one that's a little bit different from some of what we're talking about with climate and energy and COP26 right now. And hopefully you're all fueled up to be hopeful, and you've all thought of something that you can go and do this afternoon to actually, take this journey forward and build a hopeful future for all of us. I want to thank Courtney and the team again. I want to thank my team. And I just want to thank the team over at the Spark Festival, which this event was part of today. It's an Tech and Innovation Festival for Australians. And for those of you who, are new to us and new to the work that we do at Cicada Innovations, please sign up to our newsletters, get involved, stay up to date with what we're going on, participate in more conversations like this. We really do believe in a hopeful future, and we're really excited for you all to join us and be part of it. Thanks, everybody. Bye.